like, oh, right, the Zerg over in Korea play like this. You gotta kind of be reminded. And by that, I do mean that they're typically a little more aggressive, but we'll see what he has in mind for this best of 3 winners match. In the bottom right of Death Aura, we have the Afrika Freaks Blue Zerg Armani.
And in the top left position, we have the red Protoss player. He is Neeb.
All right, so we got a little probe block here that Armani was apparently already anticipating as he moves his drone over to the third base. Seems that it went from being everyone did this all the time into Resident Enclaves to stylistic, and now we're back to everyone doing this all the time, the probe block early on, but not necessarily into Resident Enclaves, certainly occasionally, but I actually think that he might be playing with a lot more Stargate play than anything else, and I guess I just want to, further talk about that intro. It's like, yeah, the Korean Zergs are known for their aggression, but I do feel like if there's going to be a Zerg player outside of Korea that's going to prep you for facing the Korean Zergs, it would be someone like Scarlet, who is known for her aggression and obviously is trained a lot in Korea. But even with that, Scarlet still has always been more unique. Always has a couple of cheekier builds, something that, no regret in her concocted and whatnot. So I do think aggression is going to be something Neeb's very familiar with. I don't know if he's at all familiar with Armani's particular style of ZVP.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the weirdest thing, right? Is if your barometer for Zergs as far as the American tournaments go is completely different than most other regions. But then to some degree, Scarlet does like to play that aggro style. And if Armani brings that out, then Neeb may find himself more in his comfort zone, if that makes any sense, which I guess we could see. I mean, somehow he apparently adjusted very well to Clem, right? Despite the fact that your Terran sample in NA is like Future and Masa, pretty much, right? And that's the degree to which they're going to push you. You usually wouldn't expect it to be from the guy that beat Raynor in the grand finals and, in a best of 7, right? That's not how things are supposed to work here in everything upside right village.
Yeah, as opposed to the upside down that we're currently in.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's like Scarlet showed like a couple of Swarm Host builds, right? Which I do think is more of a Scarlet special than I would expect of a lot of Zergs. I do think Korean Zergs. I do think the Koreans are going to do it occasionally, but as far as Armani bringing it out in this best of 3, I'd be a little surprised. And I don't think it's going to happen on Death Aura, regardless. Maybe some other maps that we have later down the line. Neeb already starting things off with a Void Ray first, which is obviously become an option for Protosses. And the Protoss has really been using this to be kind of tricky, honestly. So not only does it cover you against... Ooh. Oh, it finished. I was kidding. I thought he canceled speed. So not only does it cover you as far as killing the Overlords, hiding a Resident Enclaves, hiding a, just a regular game, 3 bases, it also can now kind of hide the Void Ray production in general, if you do want to go for the 4 or 5 and kind of go across the map. The Overlord even tries to go back and see what is that second unit, and I think it barely was able to see that it is an Oracle.
Very important to have that type of information as this Void Ray comes out. And I was going to say, we did see a handful of European Zergs bring that out, the Swarm Host build, but it's that Swarm Host timing build, the one where it's like your queens go across the map, you have some roaches and ravagers, and the Swarm Host kind of do that first volley, and then the roach ravager tries to play around it. And that actually did have some degrees of success. So it's not that I'd be crazy surprised by it, but it's not, it feels like it's a bit more of a specialized type of build for certain types of players that are maybe very passive or try to play too defensive. I don't see Neeb as that guy. I think that's one of the reasons why he's been such a lauded American player, especially, is that he's good at getting out on the map, but also macroing behind it. Whereas, most of the best players are going to say, yeah, they're really good at doing one of those things in sometimes like a crazy fashion, and they can still win and look fun from it. But you're not going to see them like consistently be able to just do like softer or harder versions of standard strategies where you don't really see a whole lot of American players that can actually pull those builds off.
There was a time where Neeb was known more than others for his adept pressure, his adept play, his adept micro. So you're right there. You can certainly provide a lot of that mid-game aggression. You got to be scared of a Neeb that's aggressive on the map. But he has also been showing, a desire to also get up into those carriers, as soon as he can, if he can. But a couple of depths. That's true. A couple of adepts try and do something here. At best, they get a couple of drones and a little bit of scouting. Double stasis trap in the main's a bit surprising, but neither one's going to get much done as the sport crawler is available. And the game does go on into a normal charge +1. So also on that swarm host thing, I feel like if it's going to be a map that it's going to provide for, it's going to be Romanticide. I could easily see Armani do it there.
Oh,
as
yeah.
A laser has done as well in Scarlet, but. Again, we'll get there when we get there. For now, it is a +1 missile on the way for Armani, so he is going into that macro game, and he's adding on a Hydralisk 10.
Okay, but Zombie Girl, riddle me this. It's not extremely common that we see going into, like, Hydras especially, out of Roaches. Like, if it's going to be a Roach Hydra sort of setup, I'm going to be quite surprised, unless it's just that he wants to get Roaches just defensively purely, because this is also going to line up for a pretty wild attack from Neeb if he chooses to go for it. And I'm not sure if Armani has 100% keyed in on it yet, because it's like, oh yeah, I took all my gases, I'm macroing hard, but 5 gauge, charge, and +1 are all about to line up real close to each other with this Prism that just came out. So if Neeb wants to start bringing some pressure, or even just even if it's just with the Warp Prism, he can. And yeah, that's the brunt of what he has, which, I mean, honestly, it isn't a lot, but that's why you have 7 gateways now, or 8, however many, off 3 bases, to try and shut down this 4th, which would be really huge if he could do it. But there's already a pretty significant number of Ravagers there.
Yeah, this isn't catching someone going up to 80 drones and skipping Roaches, right into Hydras. This would kill someone like that, and killed Scarlet, actually, in one of their games. So this is someone who has gone to actually a stable 67 drones, and then as they kind of sized up the push, they're like, I can add a few more, so up to 71, because they knew they were going to defend. This is the safest way to get to one of the most powerful tools you have, which are the Hydras. So it's not that you're blitzing there, you've protected yourself, you're not going to get bopped by a silly little push, not even going to lose your 4th base or any mining time at all. You get there safely, you get there with the upgrades, and this is a game where Neeb, he showed the attack, he was like, I can do this, but obviously I won't, you're well protected, you got to be careful of it in the future. Now that we both know what's up, we both understand each other, it's probably going to be a game where Neeb does go up to carriers. After
I mean, look at this. We've got spines going down on Armani's side, even with that big army he has. So he's getting ready to, he's boarding up the windows for the storm, as they say, and the contaminate on the robotics facility. I don't think anything was building there, but delays it regardless. If something was about to start, make you think twice about it. And yeah, now I'm just looking at the production tabs on the grill, waiting to see 2 Stargates and that fleet bacon get thrown on the grill.
I think Neeb has to get a little bit more scouting. No, he actually did see the hive. Yeah, I think we will see that in there. It actually goes right now, Fleet Beacon. So yeah, if he was like a little bit concerned about maybe a almost maxed out push, I could see him delaying it. And now he's adding on the Stargates as well. He's got Storm. It's a defensive macro map when it comes to the 4 bases, especially. You see he's got that high ground to work with on the ramp as his army moves down it. The 5th base gets a little more questionable. But the 5th base is a concern when he's probably already on a couple of carriers, which is still a ways off. And Armani, they're actually, I'm a little surprised by how much Armani dived right for the late game, actually. Like, sure, Roaches first, Lurkers second. That's nice and safe, gets to a powerful army. But even the Spine Crawlers are already being added. It's, I don't know, it feels like more like what I expected from a European ZVP. They both are just like, yep, let's macro, let's do the dance, let's go to the late game.
Here we go. Rev up those carriers. 3 on the way, +1 air. Buckle up. If you forgot to make yourself a snack before this game, it's not too late, because it'll take at least another 5 minutes for the carriers to reach critical mass, to the point where Neeb will actually want to fight. But then, you know what? Right on the other side, the Nidus network starts up. So Armani's like, okay, buddy, we're not doing it like this. We're not getting ourselves into an hour-long brawl. He's going to perhaps try to pack a hell of a punch before the carriers reach the tipping point. And especially since they removed Graviton Catapult, which was like 200 burst damage per carrier, the efficacy of them has greatly dropped until you can have enough that all the interceptors get out, but it's, you know, without losing all of them in that little window of time. If you can get 9 carriers to unload over the Zerg army, they're gonna have a good time. It's just they're not gonna burst out and wipe out half the Zerg force in the first 2 seconds of that like they used to.
And that's kind of been a problem in some past engagements that we've seen. It's like the Protoss gets to a pretty damn good army, but then they're always pretty shy about taking the engagement for understandable reasons. But then they're forced to, and instead of taking it, they try and run away. And it's like, you probably should have just let all your interceptors fly out and at least try and take a good engagement. But wow, that's a lot of hallucinations.
Do you
really want to know what's going on.
They're coming out.
Oh, some lurkers are going to burrow, but look how many storms there are. Good God, he's going to kill the lurkers with storm. You don't see that very often.
Well, you know, I thought Neeb was boarding up the windows for a storm to hit him, but apparently it was because Armani was going to get stormed from the inside. As that was an expensive loss, right? I'm not crazy. Was that like 6 lurkers that went through and died to kill 7 probes? Yeah. Okay. Well. Hey there. Hello there. That's a pretty nice fight for our American Protoss player then.
Yeah, I feel like that was one of those things that Zerg players like, well, surely they don't have that many storms. You know, like the first 2 hit, and they're like, it's fine. But it takes a lot of storms to kill the lurkers, and then the lurkers get, you know, push off the High Templars, the Hydras pop out. Like, that could be a very fatal attack. But it wasn't. It was actually a bad attack from Armani, who gets to recover because we're not having many engagements anyways. I mean, total resources lost right now is not indicative of the type of position we found ourselves in. There wasn't a lot of trading before this happened. Both of them, skyrocketed up here, already building a humongous work crawler wall. Again, just like I was like, okay, the Nidus Swarm, all right, this is what I expected, you know. But then there was one Nidus Swarm, it got slapped down, and I was like, okay, 20 spore crawlers, let's do this.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. The field of spore crawlers, like that's some straight up nightmares. Like you're a carrier, you're flying over, you see that, it's like seeing like the 700 pods with the people in them in the Matrix, and you're like, oh my God, this is reality. I don't want to have to deal with that. You cannot attack into that spore forest if the whole Zerg army is there. So Armani effectively trying to erase that bottom left position from being a viable engagement path for the Protoss opponent. And he's, you know, Neeb's building a few more Void Rays. Zombie Grub, I have to say this, despite any argument that anybody has ever tried to make since even the Void Ray buff, they do not appear to be, from what I've seen, remotely useful in any actual big fight. Like almost ever at all. I just don't. It just seems to rarely ever happen. Like I feel like it's almost 100% of the time better to just get to like 10 carriers and just support those. But maybe I'm crazy. Maybe this is the game where the Void Rays make some magic happen. It's just every time I see them in the production tab outside that first one, I start to get real nervous.
I can remember, I think I was casting with Creighton maybe, but there was a super late game on this map with Showtime, and he should have won it, but he had like 10 Void Rays, not a part of the fight. They were like chasing after a queen or something. Oh God. Yeah. See, that would have won in the fight.
That's exactly the kind of crap I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I think that Void Rays are just one of those units where it's like in a perfect world, they are ideal. They are even a hard counter to Corruptors, right? When they get the prismatic alignment and they're not being bombarded by whatever else is happening. But because of their fragile nature, and how I feel like they can be microed sometimes turns against the Protoss player because they get so fast when they have those flux veins. I think it becomes one of those units that's like theoretically perfect. In actual combat, it doesn't usually change the tide. But that's why we wait and see what happens for the engagements. And that's also why Protoss players, despite getting to this theoretically best army, are always hesitant to take engagements.
Yeah, it brings me back to, I'm quite traumatized by this match. I'm not sure if you got to see the Skillis match on Romanticide, where he had like, I was casting, that one where it's like, you've got 12 carriers, your army doesn't get better than this, you keep getting abducted, you should probably just try to take a big fight. And instead it was basically just watching individual carriers get abducted for 7 minutes until a Protoss had 3 carriers left and died. So I do hope that at the very least we get a big finish, regardless of whichever way it goes. But I think on the Protoss side of things, players need to become a little bit more proactive about seizing opportunities to take those big fights, because spore crawlers do not cost supply. They can move and they deal damage. Theoretically, as long as Armani keeps bringing in the money, he can build an infinite number of them. So this literally only gets more difficult if you want to kill the Zerg player the longer that you wait. There is no scenario where you sit back and it's like, now I can engage because he's only got 100 spores instead of 75.
Man, I feel like I don't remember them playing. I don't remember Armani playing like this against Zest. You know, maybe I'm misremembering, but like they both just sprang off the diving board right into late game, and there's doing that and getting to like double spire after like a decent lurker hydra push, and that's not really committed. Yeah. But then there's this, which is just 100 spore crawlers. No doubt going to be the number we'll eventually find ourselves if this game continues on the way that it has. Currently at 42. So I'm still 100 stack defense. All right, I'm gonna go with that one. Oh well, unless he starts killing it. Stop ruining my prediction.
Yeah, see, that's exactly the kind of thing that I'm worried about, though, right? It's these situations because they, like I said, they don't get better over time. At some point, no matter how bad it looks, you kind of have to do something. Now, I do like seeing this is, I guess, a decent opportunity to get a look at the tectonic destabilizers from the Tempest, which just allows them to kill the spore crawlers a bit faster. But the problem with that, even still, is you don't have the easy zoning capability against the Vipers, because people will be like, oh, just feedback them. But they have the range of feedback is still like almost too similar to the range of Abduct, that if the Viper takes the initiative, it's very hard to just get that High Templar there to feedback it in time, as a bunch of Hydras are going to go for a counterattack, walk through multiple cannons and storms, and they won't do a whole lot. So that's an interesting move, to say the least, over there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is it's very hard to slowly chip away at this without the Vipers peeling away at that army, because it's like, oh, I killed a spore. Yes, there are 30 of them left.
Yeah.
Got 30 more spore crawlers to get through. At this pace, the game will be over in 3 hours, maybe.
This is so similar to that game I referenced earlier. I think it was against like a Dark or someone, you know, like it was a season finals again. It ended with the Zerg player winning, but in a position where they really should not have. And you're just describing like all the situations where it feels like, yeah, the Protoss would have the better situation, and then suddenly they end up losing anyways. I mean, you even brought up the Skills game, which kind of was a similar thing. This game won't end anytime soon, unless Armani does. I think he would be the one to pull the trigger and then actually engage, and it's really bad. I think we're gonna have 30 minutes, I'm gonna guess. And it's gonna come down to these last two bases on Death Aura, in the middle left and the middle right. But I'm kind of hoping it doesn't end up that way. I mean, long games are cool when there's a lot of action, but I'm doubting the possibility of a lot of action here. I mean, you've got a couple of DTs in, way to go, but that's about all he's done.
Like, as far as backstab opportunities that can present themselves in these types of game situations, the only thing that really jumps out to me, Zombie Grub, is literally just that. It's like try to fly around, maybe like right side of where Neeb's army is, right? You have to hope the Zerg doesn't just run across the map and try to kill you or abduct you, but like there's not a, is there a spore field in the main base? Like if you just flew all the air around the right side, like honestly, this is the kind of thing that I'm thinking about, because if you engage an army that's like got 300 supply worth of damage output, you are going to have a hard time no matter how good your force is, right? That's the tricky part about when letting the game reach this stage where the Zerg just, what's the structures tab actually? I want to see it. Nice. That's a lot of changelings. Can we make them dance? They have 44 spores. Okay, it's a little bit lower than I thought. There's actually more cannons on the map than spores. That's impressive.
Yeah, they're really concentrated, I guess, the spores. You know, I guess I gotta really just go back to the last game. So it was Rogue, I think. It was Rogue for Showtime. Rogue ended up going for a lot of busts on the left side. So it was actually the same situation, same places. And he would send Ling Baneling Ultra, which Armani's also adding in now, to the left. And it seemed fruitless. You know, Showtime had perfect defense even for about, I want to say 15, 20 minutes, literally. Until suddenly he just couldn't defend that left side anymore. And we were just kind of like, why would he do that? Why would he do that? Why would he do it? And I was like, I think he's just trying to open up an opportunity to get into the natural and the main, which did end up kind of working in his favor, but I'll talk about it more after maybe this fight is actually kind of going down. Lots of Tempest getting abducted. I mean, it's again, not going to be the end, but Okay, there's a little bit of action there, a little bit of trading.
Yeah. But they both got a decent bit of money, and at the very least, on the Protoss side of things, when the resources are this lopsided, you can make like 5,000 Archons if you need to. That's not necessarily what you want to do if they're going to be shooting static defense while lurkers kill them all. But you have that option. Yeah. And I don't know. I'm trying to think, like, as far as like creative solutions to this problem go, I don't know. Like, at what point do we get like the 3 prisms trying to fly into the main base and like get like a couple through and maybe kill some tech from behind, force the army to reposition or the Vipers to move? I'm not sure. And this is becoming such a straight up engagement type setup that I feel is, I mean, with the mothership, that actually does help a lot with keeping the Templar able to be a little bit more forward in these spots. So it's harder for the abducts. But like, where's the path to victory when you do this? You know, like, is it, I guess it really is just wearing out your opponent and hoping you can get them to make a bullheaded move before it's too late.
Again, I think that's what Rogue's plan was. A lot of it, he was really just sending over like most of his supply over to the left side to break it, and he eventually did, and it eventually broke the natural too. And then he got access to the main base, which meant that Showtime was pretty all in, or at least had to spend a lot of minerals rebuilding things that he wanted to rebuild. In that game, though, it took so long, it didn't end up mattering. It took so long. Showtime rebuilt what he needed over to the right side and just like reinforced when he had to. But he was like, it turned out to one of those like, you know, 0 probe situations, full army. Armani could try and do the same thing. And like, if he was maybe faster, harder, actually cleaned up the left side of Death Aura, I could see that being a good tactic. But clearly Armani is not thinking the same way that Rogue thought about that particular 45-minute PvP on Death Aura. He is thinking about that direct engagement. And when it comes down to the direct engagements, I'm not really sure if either one of them were anticipating taking the better fight with the way that's it's set up here. I mean, Zerg moving to cannons and shield batteries, the Protoss moving into Spore Crawlers and Vipers. Like, no one should ever feel confident about taking the fight.
Yeah, and I was really talking about it like this earlier because it is a little bit easier to get that Spore setup since you can move them. But now that it's a Spore forest outside of a cannon battery forest, I mean, we've got 2 competing ecosystems fighting over the same water supply, Zombie Grub, and one of them is going to eventually get starved out when this happens, and you know the other's roots will take over and take those nutrients. But you're completely right, though. We've reached that tipping point where if the Zerg attacks into the Protoss army with 15 cannons and 7 batteries and an overcharge and all that, the Zerg will get wiped. If the Protoss attacks into the Spores and Spines, and the whole Zerg army, the Protoss will get wiped. So at the end of the day, this is just going to be, can you chip away at the static defense of the Zerg fast enough before they commit enough to actually kill your bases back home? Because I feel like that opportunity is going to be there for Armani. He's eaten half the map now, and he's getting those pocket bases on the west side too.
Hey, they're fighting over water and oil, and this is like the most docile Mad Max ever. And it just comes down to one player spray painting their mouth and saying, "Witness me," and like just hoping to God that it actually works out. I think it's that happening. I think that's the way it's going to go down. Someone's going to get more frustrated than the other.
You get that angry shirtless guy on top of a carrier screaming as they go riding in,
Exactly.
That's exactly the kind of high level StarCraft that I get out of bed for in the morning. Just a little late.
Just a little late to it though, but you came just in time, Nate. Aren't you so happy?
I will say this. When I have my panic reaction, the time from seeing that message that was like, "Hey, are you alive?" to me being at my chair with a shirt on was, I think, less than 2 minutes. I was pretty quick on that. But yeah, I'm glad I didn't miss that Neeb match actually, because that one ended up being really awesome. Hit that in the nick of time. But I'm certainly glad I didn't miss this, because it's just beautiful. It's like watching. It's like one of those paintings where they just throw all the paint towards the top of a big canvas and you just watch it drip down and see what happens. Yeah, it's literally one of those.
Whoa, he's actually going for it, man. These Admirals going down in the Tempest. Corruptor is trying to focus fire, but occasionally actually hitting Interceptors is not exactly what you would want. Prismatic Alignment has actually been in effect. No, actually, it's going into effect for Armani now, as he's neuroed those as well. He's even neuroed an Oracle, for the love of God. I don't think he recalled the rest, but
yeah, he recalled the rest of the Immortals and the High Templar over underneath the army. They actually instigated all but one of the Infestors, and that one is now dead too. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm sitting there watching Neeb's army get obliterated, and he's like, call an ambulance. And then the recall triggers, and he's like, but not for me. Exactly. Wipes the rest of that. But this is when we talk about advantages, right? This is how the game is designed. This is how things work. The Zerg has been able to bank an infinite amount of larvae, right? We know that they know this is just the way that StarCraft works. You have all these hatcheries, you build up this larva count so that you can remax quickly. Neeb needs to be a little bit careful. He was building like 7 Void Rays at a time. He's rebuilding the mothership, but the Protoss army does build a little bit slower. It's a very strong army. That's why it has to build a little bit slower. That's why it's expensive. So this is a key moment now for Neeb to just keep his bearings, not lose anything significant, as Armani's going to be flooding out tons of units back onto the field. We just had, what, 30 Corruptors get built, a ton of Lings, but now we're going back into the Infestors. Now we're going back into the Ultralisks. There is a small window where if Neeb wants to try to deal some damage to the extremities, he can try, but it's not going to be that easy.
The Remax is a little too good for now. I mean, that's the one Remax you get for Armani, unless he buys another 10 minutes, because he has used up all of his bank. But it really did turn south for him, you know? He did the, like, witness me thing, but then it was that scene in the movie where the guy gets knocked out by a door handle, right? Like, that did not go his way. 50 supply down at the end of that and having used all of his resources, while Neeb did not really get much done on the counter as much as I think we were hoping for. Considering that he did have a pretty strong ground army to try and push through. It was still one that was an engagement where Armani now has to even be more worried about the resources that are allotted on this map. Like, how many resources can I get to do that again? And then he also is probably going to be a lot shyer about taking an engagement like that again. Maybe he saw something in the engagement that he could have fixed. You know, maybe he wishes he had taken down the Void Rays, all of them with Neural Parasite, as opposed to a couple of those Tempests. But I don't know. I would say just usually you don't want to be the person engaging. And I was just
it's
more
hard.
like I think it can
it's
work.
Hard whenever
maybe
carriers are involved, though. Even with Neural, whenever carriers are involved, you get weird AI stuff. So there's like the extra step added of you need to make sure you focus fire down the carriers if you Neural the Void Rays, which is not easy, obviously. And that's what makes this whole situation is just wild. The number of Void Rays that have been used in general is still impressive to me. And here we go. We're gonna build another field of cannons and batteries up on this little spot underneath here. And if one of these players could wedge out another base from the other, I think that would be pretty huge, because based on everything, you know, as much as you normally talk about the Zerg supposed to be the one taking all the bases, it also does occur to me now that this has actually just been perfectly split map, which with a limited number of resources should theoretically favor Protoss, right? Because Zerg is supposed to get more money.
Yeah, doesn't actually have that many. I mean, it's got a decent amount of bases, but it's not like it's Ultrazine Stronghold.
Yeah, no, well, thank God for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
5 people in chat just cringed.
Yeah, the people remember that map. That was terrible. That was terrible for many reasons, actually.
Yeah.
Banelin's coming in to try and crash through the stack defense, but getting stormed to death beforehand. Once again, Armani not being shy about moving in for the engagements. He's finding a lot of Void Rays, though, with mostly Corruptors, a couple of Parasitic Bombs, sure. But once again, Armani is just, well, he's going to tap out this time. GG.
Yeah. Oh, he had the mothership there. Maybe he didn't see all the cannons and spores underneath, but we got a nice little bit of Joker. I'm going to make this army disappear. Go on there by our Protoss player, because if you're able to take that fight, you're defensively. If we talk about Void Rays, they can be squishy. They don't have that built-in armor. But if you're fighting you're gonna fight 10 Void Rays with Corruptors over cannons and batteries. I mean, yeah, no, that says it all. That says it all. I don't have anything else I have to say there.
Well, I guess we saw what was one of the lightest carrier armies we've seen in a bit, right? I think I checked once and it was at 3 carriers, and then he was still building like Void Rays. Which I think was very correct for that game. It can be a little bit odd, though, because if you are being chased, or if you are chasing around, or you're being pulled left and right by the Zerg, suddenly a couple of abducts really start to look quite poor for the Zerg. It's usually what we would see. Sorry for the Protoss, but that game just provided a lot of like, okay, let's do it. Let's just go for one big engagement, less about the finesse that we've seen, I think, on like an Ice and Chrome in the past, like Scarlet versus Estrella. And then I guess he just never really thought about doing anything to the static defense before it got set up. So I don't know. Was Rogue correct in his way to handle that last season in a similar situation against Showtime? Maybe he was. Was Neeb more correct about as many Void Rays as he did? Is that actually the way to go? I don't know, maybe. Because I'm also thinking about a game where I cast with Roddy, and it was like we were doing that thing again where we were like kind of yelling like, just take the fight, take the fight, take the fight. I think that was the Estrella Scarlet game, and it was just it was like mostly Void Rays. And we were like, no, this isn't working. So I still am a little bit confused about what the ideal army was. But I think we can all agree at the end of the game, the ideal army against Armani's army was what Neeb had. He did choose the right things.
And, you know, all credit to him for the patience as well. Get your opponent to attack into you in that situation. I do think that fight looks completely different if that's happening over Spores and Spines, right? If it's the other way around and you're attacking into all those Corruptors, you're like, oh, I've got my Void Rays, but you've got all the Spores there, dealing all that extra damage. The Void Rays don't have any of the shield regen. That's where it's like, then you see the Void Rays die quickly and you're like, oh, okay, that's a bad idea. But hey, these are the moments where the players do things that can change our minds about that stuff. If Neeb is going to tactfully employ large numbers of late game Void Rays effectively, I'm more than happy to say, hey, this is a guy that's just finally found the way to do it correctly without, you know, just throwing away thousands of resources. Because a lot of people who do Voids, they're a little bit too forward with them, right? They get picked off. You lose one or two of them early. It gets ugly, or their army is just way too many Void Rays and they're just too squishy in a big fight. But if he's able to get that type of harass play going, avoid the Corruptors, and then force a big defensive engagement over cannons, I think the Void Rays will always be good in those situations. I don't think that carriers would be much worse, honestly, but you know, it is what it is. Yeah. He made it happen. He made it work. And at the end of the day, if you can make it work with Void Rays instead of carriers, they do move a lot faster. So there's more you can do with them theoretically.
I think that's one of the big things is that on some other maps, we've seen the Void Rays be a little too far forward. I mean, kind of even talked about it towards the beginning of that, where I'm like, yeah, sometimes the Void Rays are supposed to be perfect, but more often they kind of get ahead of the other army. They're always picked off or parasitic bombed. They're forced to retreat, and it starts the engagement off really awkwardly. But every time every time Armani thought that he was going to take a good engagement, he saw maybe a very clumped up Protoss army seemed to be kind of what shared, you know, the reason why he would pull the trigger. That seems to be the two fights he took was because the Protoss army was really clumped up. He was not right. I think playing, perhaps trying to catch him more out of position might have been better, but I think even after that first big fight, checking the resources lost after that, it was like a 20,000 difference or something. It was really insane. He just he seemed so eager to play out the late game on that map. He seemed so eager. I thought he'd have a better chance when it came to those engagements, but he really didn't. Every engagement looked so poor for him, and I think he's going to avoid that late game situation here in game number 2.
So maybe we get another bowl of oops, all roaches then, going into game number 2 of this match. Jess, in the bottom right, we've got leading 1-0. Man, he really did have a fire lit under him by Estrella, didn't he? He is Neeb.
In the top left, as the blue Zerg for Afrika Freaks, he is Armani. Another ZVP where you look at it and you're like, what could the Zerg have done better? I think Armani looked at that game and looks at the map that we're on and is like, you know what I could do better? Not do that. Not go into a dozen Spore Crawlers and late game. He tried one little Nidus tactic and that was kind of it. He was headed towards the late game and then just embraced it when Neeb also headed towards the late game. Here on Lightshade, one of our shortest maps, a lot of open fields. I'd love to see Armani actually play more so with the Lurker phase or with the Roach phase.
I'm down with that. I think something else important, the biggest thing, like when the Corruptors were like trying to chase the Void Rays after they poked the mineral line on the base that was like right outside where the main was on Death Aura, like there's only 2 cannons there. He tried to do a Lurker drop and there was like some carriers and Tempest there. As soon as they killed it, they got recalled. And I'm like, at what point do you try to like really heavily commit to something like that? Like maybe take 4 or 5 Overlords or build multiple Nidus networks and try to just hit multiple bases at once. Like I asked myself, like how much can you try to get away with that when you have a big bank? But I understand that both players are worried about getting into fights, and it sounds silly, and it sounds like, you know, it's very easy to say as an observer or, you know, as a caster, I guess in this instance. It's like, oh, well, if he tried to get like, you know, just do like the 3 prism thing that some players do, run him around the side, the main base didn't have anywhere near as much as any of the front areas, right? Is there a way to sneak the mothership in and get a big recall, right? And then you can kind of the Zerg has to fight you because you're in their base, but the spores and the spines aren't there, so it's still a little bit more of a favorable engagement for you because the tech is all there, right? The hive is exposed, the spire, and I felt like sometimes these games get a little bit tunnel visioned on the direct engagement, but I also understand at the same time that the direct engagement there decides the game when you're playing with such big armies. So making the best move is really, really difficult for either player. And I mean, he could easily have thrown the game if he tried to do something like that, right? Like, I'm not going to pretend it's an ace in the hole move, but I think that there's still a lot of room. I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot of room for this type of scenario to grow in terms of what players will be willing to do or try to pull off in these situations.
Again, Rogue kind of tried what you're talking about, and it ended up with him. He was supposed to lose the game. It didn't happen, but that's for another reason. He was losing the game for sure. So there's really not like a brilliant answer, like a direct, like, you know, oh, well, clearly Armani should have done this. Like there's a lot of question marks. And I think Death Aura might just be one of the more brutal maps to allow a Protoss to get to that stage because there is that very strong expanding yet defending.
It's one of the best defensive maps in that way. Yeah. Everything built around those first 4 bases is almost impossible to break. So I completely get that. Yeah.
Well, Lightshade is quite different. So Lightshade doesn't really have a super secure third. You know, it's good enough, right? Obviously, the Void a lot about third bases, but fourth gets a little bit stretched out. Fifth base as well. Lots of concave opportunity on top of the bases too, whereas Death Aura has a couple more of those high ground ramps and chokes to work with. So just that with the map, we should be seeing something very, very different. And I think it would be started by Armani. A lot of Protoss players are going for Resident Glaives in this map, and Neeb could have maybe done a follow-up Resident Glaives to start Neeb, but he does not seem to want to do that. So as we kind of, I guess, push him to the side, say, okay, he's just going to macro, eyes are more on Armani. He starts a +1 missile, so it's clearly going to go to a certain phase, 8-10 minutes, but what else can he do to maybe not let Neeb get into that similar position? Well, losing a couple of drones to the natural Oracle is not a great start.
Yeah, this the Oracle play in the early game is something that a lot of Zerg players have gotten pretty good at figuring out. Now, with this really quick +1 missile attacks, do you think that this is it then, what we're talking about, what we were alluding to at the start of this game, that perhaps he's not going to try to let this game go crazy long? Or I don't know, that's it gets me excited because there's no lair on the way. So if he's not going to have that lair done, or unless I just completely missed it while I was listening to you, I think it's only just now starting. Like, there's not too much you can do with that, I guess.
Yeah, there's not really a lot of all-ins that are based off of no roach speed +1. I think that Roach Warren might... it might have been just a safety Roach Warren, because Neeb did show that he is capable of doing that his own +1 attack last game. And he made Roaches last game, and that was fine because Neeb was actually engaging. This game, he might once again have to build Roaches, sure, but I think he might even be looking more towards Hydras, like faster to that section of the game, where that's where we saw, like, I think Scarlet tried it a couple times versus Neeb as well, and once or twice barely didn't defend, and once or twice did defend situation. So I'm guessing anyways, as the fourth base comes down, Armani is probably going to swiftly move on to even further upgrades beyond that. And now I guess we go back to what Neeb is going to do here. Does he start up his... Oh, he hasn't started up his +1 or his charge yet. His micro and his oracles a bit here. I think he'll start his macro at home though. There we go. Yeah,
definitely keep the eye on the prize. There's charge, +1. These are probably two of the most important upgrades you're going to get. As we all know, if Charged Zealots get onto the squishy underbelly of the Zerg army, like those Hydras, then they can definitely do a tremendous amount of damage. You still want to try and do a little bit of a body check or a gut check on that fourth base. If you can knock it down, great. If you can't, well, at least you force the Zerg to invest and commit to be able to defend that, right? You don't want to let the Zerg player just coast and eat the map and do all of the Zerg things, because that's how you lose. That's how you lose games of StarCraft.
Now, this is really not an attack. It is I'm here.
It's please build units. Please take me seriously. I'm gonna kill you with 2 Immortals and 1 Void Ray.
Exactly.
Are you though? I don't think so.
But it's something that you gotta at least try to do, and hopefully they aren't prepared, ready with a bunch of Lings and Hydras to kill you. And that is it. You called it pretty correct. The Roach Warren was just there for safety, not even bothering to get Roach speed. It was right into those Hydras, additional upgrade. I think it's going to be a lot more emphasis on the lurker phase of the game. actually trying to catch Neeb out of position, or simply, in an ideal world, bowl him over with 12 lurkers fully upgraded. But Neeb has certainly had a lot of practice against that, and I think it's actually up to Neeb right now to determine that exact scenario, actually. Is it going to be a lot of lurker pressure? Should maybe get a second robo? Or should I just try and defend with what I have, go stay up to the Stargate? Because that is an option against a lot of lurker play. It's definitely the option against, you know, the Supreme late game that we saw last time. And I can't believe that Armani's going to do that again, despite getting some similar trajectory here.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I got distracted because he was destroying those rocks on his ramp, and even though they're really small rocks, they still have the full amount of hit points of real rocks, like the big ones. So just watching that whole army take like 30 seconds to kill a small rock, I'm easily distracted. I'm sorry, Zombie Grunt. I'm just like, it's funny to watch that. It's funny to watch that. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, TLDR, it's like Armani could easily go back into super stack defense mode if we see 12 Spore Crawlers. Okay, that's where we're gonna go. That's where we're gonna go. But for Neeb, he can react to the Fleet Beacon either to a lot of lurker pressure and just try and win out with the army that he has on the ground while, you know, barely getting to carriers, or he embraces the late game once again with that Fleet Beacon.
He's getting it.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
on the road.
I think that's his response to either option. Of what we've seen from him in the past, he's been pretty good with these small groups of units. Storm plus Immortal can actually defend quite a few points. But it's Armani who I'm like, no, you can't. You got to do something before that. You got to do something before you're headed into the same path. Like, I know it's a different map, and maybe that late game scenario is different on Lightshade, sure, but I would be frightened. I'm frightened for him to let that happen. I want to see him engage. I want to see him build a bunch of lurkers. Right now, just defending against Neebs, again, not really real push. He has so much invested into other things, upgrades and production, that I don't think he's really going to do very much here. But Armani, I would love for him to push this back and then immediately counter.
No, I completely agree. This army is really like ripe for the taking, especially with that Ling that baited the stasis trap. There is another one or two behind this army, but that retreat path, if it gets cut off, you're going to be in for a world of hurt, because the storms are the only things that keep the Hydras at bay. And if the Hydras are able to help whittle away at those Immortals, well, we know that lurkers will kill everything. But there we go. 3 more carriers being built. +1 air is coming in. Only thing I'm going to point out is that I actually really like how Armani has focused on his Carapace upgrades. I think this is a really important thing, because the carriers are going to come out. Even if that +1 finishes soon, they're still down 1 upgrade, because the +2 Carapace is about to finish at a decent time. There'll be a short window where it's even. But I always feel like if you're playing against like carriers or battle cruisers, anything that shoots really fast, right, you're going to want to have those armor upgrades, because they really do pay for themselves a lot more than versus other units. But that's what you were talking about, this big counter coming up from Armani. That is a tremendous number of lurkers, and there are only those 3 carriers finishing right now with the +1. But carriers do not spawn with full interceptors, so he needs to be very cautious about making sure that he has enough to take this, because if all the interceptors just get swatted down immediately, there won't be much to stop the lurkers from continuing to advance as they knock down the cannons, knock down more of the shield batteries, and the carriers have to rear their ugly heads.
Those Immortals now have their shields back, plus they're already low, so engaging on those lurkers, even though the number has been cut a little bit, is probably not a fantastic idea. He might have to give up his 4th base. He's actually going to go for it. The Immortals have their hardened shields once again. Carries a few more interceptors, a couple of storms hitting both lurkers and Hydras, and he is actually going to clean this up. Armani a bit distracted from some zealots on his own 4th base, has a lot of his reinforcements dealing with that as opposed to supplementing his forward army. Neeb just showing how good he is with the army he had, right? I was saying that he's found himself in this position before, and sometimes he gets caught out of position. His carriers aren't in the right place, his storms aren't plentiful enough, sure, that happens. But other times, Neeb has actually shown great use of what seems like a small army. Only 6 Immortals and half a dozen charge lots. Only High Templars that will get ripped to shreds if they get close to those lurkers. And then he once again breaks through. Excellent defense there from Neeb. Armani, with that not working, I mean, he really does have to think about how he plays the rest of this game out. Either he tries that again against more interceptors and more carriers, and it probably doesn't work, or he kind of feigns aggression while getting double Spire and all the gas possible on the map to transition to the late game. So it's kind of a question of, like, I mean, if he continues doing this, it's almost getting more all in, right? Every time, every second that passes, because you just don't beat out late game Protoss air armies with Hydra Lurker.
No, you absolutely don't. At some point, you have to have that healthy corruptor count with Vipers, because the carriers, I mean, corruptors have 2 armor by default. They have the 2 carapace. That is one of the big reasons why they're good against carriers, because they can't really kill them that effectively, especially if you get upgrades like that. So you really need to be cautious with that, because the other important thing to keep in mind is that Hydralisks are, they're pretty squishy. Zombie grub. I think, you know, if you eat a full storm, the carrier would probably kill it in like, what, 1 hit, maybe 2, I guess. So that's one of the other big important things to keep in mind, as the lurker count is not always going to be to your benefit. If you get too many of them, then you don't have enough supply available to actually build the number of Hydras that you're going to need to actually kill those carriers.
That Spire is a long ways off, and only a single one too, so he'd be behind in upgrades for quite some time. He's going to try and engage on top of this army, just a YOLO move right there, but there's so many storms. I don't think that worked out. I mean, I guess he got rid of a lot of the storms for the Hydras, so there is that. A parasitic bomb as well, injuring these carriers. Could we see Microbial Shroud? I think we actually should. If the army looks like this is actually when Microbial Shroud should be used.
How dare you invoke the dark text, zombie grub? How dare you try to summon dark Wiccan magic in this StarCraft game with Microbial Shroud? Well, there's a lot of Lings and Hydras that are going to be coming up.
Yeah.
Behind this is the interceptor count was also largely called. So Neeb's going to continue to reinforce. He wants to drive the nail in through Armani's heart right here, right now. Vipers are trying to get more energy back. Zealots continue to hack and whack and smack away at this army. They do kind of get separated a bit. Nice abduct on the Prism. Eliminating that is actually super important.
Yeah, that was a really nice abduct, and the interceptor is not quite plentiful enough, maybe, it looks like. It's still really close. I mean, the amount of charge lots actually ended up being the real problem, as the Hydras were left undefended after the Lurkers just YOLO'd on top of the army. Some tech structures going down, but he's going to target down one of the carriers. I think he lost both of his Vipers to that cheeky Void Ray, actually. They were soaking up energy on the hatchery, and he really could have used an abduct there. I mean, that's probably much as only... And Microbial Shroud, I'm honest, I'm being real right now. That's what you're doing against the interceptors. But targeting down the last carrier is still not going to be enough. Armani has lost 51 drones, 2 bases. He's at half the supply if need. It looks clutch on the front lines, but on the back lines, Neeb's macro he's unhindered.
Yeah, no, he's looking good. I mean, not really too much more I think we need to say. It's 54 supply to 134, and carriers are still in the production tab. Actually, well, I mean, Neeb still has a production tab, which also kind of says everything we need to know at this point. That was a very well taken fight. I really like how decisive Neeb was in this series, and I really enjoyed the way that, as you were talking about it, that big siege up on the 4th, where it's like, oh, is he going to pull back? Is he going to give up the 4th base? I like that Neeb looked at it, recognized, okay, there's a chance I can win this, maybe not 100%, but I'm going to go for it. And that confidence, that step forward, he obliterated that army, took it all the way back across the map. And I mean, he secured himself a game-winning position. This Hydra Den's going to finish, and Armani's got $100 to try and do something with it. And that's not going to be the answer. I think all you got to do is mostly just try to sidestep where the lurkers are with the ground units. Or I guess if you feel like you want to take a cost and effective fight and just end the game now, you could just kill all the lurkers too. That's also okay. Just lead with the carriers, because there's not really many / any Hydras anymore.
Parasitic bomb the observer. That was his last hurrah.